If you've ever been on a cruise, you know that feeling. That first night standing on the balcony, watching the coastline disappear behind you. No signal bars, no way to call for help, just open water in every direction. I used to think that was peaceful. Now I can't board a ship without checking every lock twice. This happened 3 years ago on a 7-day cruise out of Miami. I'd saved up for almost a year to take this trip with my wife, Rachel. It was supposed to be a break from work, from bills, from everything. We got on board, dropped our bags in the cabin, and spent the first 2 days doing exactly what you'd expect. Pool, coffees, way too much food at the buffet. Normal stuff. The kind of trip you post pictures from. The third night is when things started feeling off. We were at the ship's casino, and Rachel had gone back to the room early because she wasn't feeling great. I stayed a little longer with a guy I'd met at the blackjack table, a guy who said his name was Dale. Older, maybe 50s, friendly enough. He worked in ship maintenance, he said, knew the boat inside and out. He started talking about parts of the ship passengers never see. Crew corridors below deck, storage levels. He said it like he was proud of it, like he wanted someone to be impressed. I didn't think much of it at the time. I said goodnight and went back to the cabin around midnight. Rachel was asleep. I remember checking the door lock out of habit, nothing more, and going to bed. The next morning, she told me something strange. She said she woke up around 1 a.m. because she heard the cabin door open and close. She assumed it was me coming back from the casino, but I didn't get back until after midnight, and when I did, she was already asleep, and the door hadn't opened since. When she checked the peephole that morning, there was a piece of tape covering it from the outside. Small, clear tape, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I told her it was probably nothing, maybe housekeeping, maybe a mistake, but I peeled it off myself, and I remember how carefully it had been placed, not sloppy, not accidental. That day we mentioned it to a crew member at guest services, almost as a joke, and the woman behind the desk didn't laugh. She just nodded slowly and said she'd note it down. That reaction stuck with me more than the tape did. We didn't see Dale the rest of that day, but that night back in our cabin I noticed our safe was slightly open. We always kept it locked, always closed it the same way. Rachel was particular about it. Nothing was missing. Passports were there, cash was there. But it was open, just a crack, like someone had checked it and put it back the way they thought we'd left it. At this point I wasn't sleeping right. I kept the desk chair wedged under the door handle that night, which felt paranoid and also felt like the only thing keeping me calm enough to close my eyes. On the 5th day, we were at a port stop in Cozumel. Rachel wanted to stay on the ship and rest, and I went ashore for a few hours with some people from the trivia group we'd been doing all week. When I got back around 4 in the afternoon, Rachel was standing outside our cabin door in the hallway, not inside. She wouldn't go back in. She said when she'd gone to freshen up before I returned, she found one of her earrings sitting on the pillow. Not in her jewelry bag where she always kept it, on the pillow. Centered, she hadn't taken it out. She hadn't touched it all week. We went straight to security. This time they didn't just nod and note it down. They asked us to come to an office below decks, past a door that needed a badge to open, down a narrow hallway that didn't look anything like the polished decks upstairs. That's when things got heavier. They sat us down and asked if we'd had any contact with crew members outside of normal service. I mentioned Dale from the casino. The security officer's expression changed just slightly, but I caught it. He asked us to describe him in detail. Height, build, any accent, anything he'd said about his job. Then he excused himself for almost 20 minutes, and Rachel and I just sat there in that small room, not talking, both of us running through every conversation we'd had that week, trying to figure out who else might have been listening. When he came back, he told us there was no crew member named Dale working in maintenance. Not currently, not in the last 6 months. He said passengers sometimes get approached by someone posing as staff, using old uniforms bought online or taken from crew who'd left the company. He said it happens more than people think, on ships this size, with thousands of guests and hundreds of crew rotating through. Easy to blend in, easy to disappear into a crowd wearing the right shirt. They moved us to a different cabin that night on a different deck, and had a security escort walk us there personally. I didn't sleep at all. Every sound the ship made, every creak, every distant noise in the hallway outside, I was awake for all of it. The next 2 days were a blur of trying to act normal while feeling like we couldn't fully trust the space around us. We didn't leave the cabin much. We ate room service instead of the buffet, and even then I found myself checking the tray before Rachel touched anything on it, which is a strange thing to admit out loud, but it's true. Rachel barely spoke. She kept her phone in her hand constantly, even though there was no signal out there to call anyone. I think it just made her feel like she had something to hold on to. On the last full day, ship security called us back in. They told us they'd reviewed hallway camera footage from our original deck. They found a man matching Dale's description entering our hallway twice during hours when the corridor should have been empty, both times using what looked like a master key card, the kind only issued to actual crew. They still didn't have his real identity. The card had been reported lost by an employee who'd left the ship 2 months earlier in Fort Lauderdale. They never found him. Not before we disembarked, not after, as far as I know. The cruise line gave us a partial refund and a lot of apologies and told us they'd flagged the case with maritime authorities. I don't know what happened after that. I never got a follow-up call. What still gets to me isn't just that a stranger had access to our room. It's the restraint. He didn't take anything. He didn't threaten us directly. He just wanted us to know he could get in whenever he wanted, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. The tape on the peephole, the safe cracked open, the earring on the pillow, small, deliberate signs, each one worse than the last, each one designed to make us feel exactly what we felt. Helpless, thousands of miles from anywhere, floating in the middle of the ocean with a stranger who had a key to our door, and all the time in the world. We haven't been on a cruise since. Every time someone brings it up, I think about that hallway camera footage. A man walking calmly past our door at 2 in the morning, using a key that wasn't his, like he had nowhere else to be. And I think about how many other doors on that ship, on any ship, he might have opened before ours. Have you ever been somewhere you couldn't leave, hundreds of miles from land, and realized the danger wasn't in the water, it was already on board with you? That's what happened to me on a 7-day cruise out of Miami, and I still think about it every single day. I grew up hunting with my dad in Tennessee. I've worked construction on job sites where guys got hurt bad, and none of that prepared me for what I saw on Deck 9 of a ship called the Horizon Voyager. I booked the cruise with my buddy Derek. We'd been friends since high school, and we figured a week at sea would be a good break from everything, work, bills, all of it. We got on board in Miami on a Sunday, and the first 2 days were exactly what you'd expect. Buffets, pool bars, a comedy show. Nothing felt off. Nothing felt wrong. It was the 3rd night things started to shift. We were at the restaurant around midnight when a guy named Trent started talking to us. Late 30s, maybe early 40s, wearing a Hawaiian shirt that looked brand new, like he'd bought it in the gift shop that same day. He was friendly. Too friendly, looking back. He asked where we were from, told us he was traveling alone because his divorce had just gone through. We didn't think much of it. Cruises are full of guys like that, lonely, looking for someone to talk to. But over the next 2 nights, Trent kept finding us. Not in a way that felt threatening at first, just constant, at breakfast, at the pool, in line for the water slide. Derek joked that we'd made a new best friend, whether we wanted one or not. On the 5th night, everything changed. We were up on the top deck, the adults-only section, past 11 at night. It was mostly empty up there, just us and Trent, who'd shown up like he always did. Derek stepped away to use the restroom, and for a few minutes it was just me and Trent at the railing, looking out at nothing but black water and stars. That's when he started talking different, quieter. He told me he'd lost his job before the divorce, that his ex-wife got the house, the car, everything. He said it like he was still processing it, like the anger hadn't caught up to the words yet. And then he said something that made my stomach drop. He said, "You ever think about how easy it would be to just disappear out here? Nobody would even notice for hours." I laughed it off, told him he needed some sleep, tried to keep it light. But something in his face didn't match his voice. His eyes were flat, calm in a way that didn't match what he was saying. Derek came back a minute later, and Trent snapped right out of it, laughing, asking if we wanted to hit the late-night pizza place. Just like that, he was the friendly guy from the restaurant again. I told Derek what happened as soon as we got some distance from him. Derek thought I was overreacting, said the guy was just going through a rough patch. I wanted to believe that. I really did. The next morning at breakfast, we heard the news going around the ship. Security had been called to a cabin on Deck 7 overnight. A passenger, a man traveling alone, had gotten into a violent altercation with his cabin mate. Someone he'd only just met on the ship through one of those roommate matching programs some cruise lines offer for solo travelers. The other guy ended up in the ship's medical center. Crew wouldn't say much, but the rumor spreading through the buffet line was that the attacker had been talking for days about how nobody would even know if something happened out here. Same words. Almost exactly the same words Trent had said to me the night before. I need you to understand what that does to you. You're on a ship. There's no getting off. No calling a cab, no walking home, no locking your own front door behind you. For the next 2 days, I kept my cabin door double-locked, and I made Derek promise we wouldn't split up again for the rest of the trip, not even to grab a coffee. We avoided Trent completely after that, changed our dinner seating, stuck to crowded areas only. But on the last full day of the cruise, I saw him again, alone at a table near the pool, just staring out at the water with that same flat expression from the top deck. He didn't wave, didn't smile. He just watched us walk by like he was studying something. I found out later, after we got off the ship, that the man from Deck 7, the one who'd attacked his roommate, wasn't traveling under his real name. He'd used a fake ID to book the cruise, and when authorities looked into it, they found out he'd been asked to leave 2 other cruises in the past year for similar incidents. Nobody flagged it because the names didn't match. He just kept getting back on boats, meeting new strangers, and eventually something in him would snap. I'll never know for sure if it was Trent. I want to say it wasn't. I want to believe the guy I talked to on the top deck was just a sad, lonely man going through a divorce, saying things because he was hurting, not because he meant them. But I think about that conversation more than I'd like to admit. The way his voice didn't match his eyes. The way he said, "disappear," like he'd already pictured exactly how it would happen. We disembarked in Miami on a Sunday morning, and I've never felt so relieved to see land in my life. I haven't been on a cruise since. Maybe I never will again, because the ocean isn't what scared me out there. It was realizing that for 7 days, I was locked on a boat with thousands of strangers, and there was absolutely no way to know which one of them was dangerous until it was already too late. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, you know that feeling of being completely cut off from the world. No signal, no way to call for help, just water in every direction. What I'm about to tell you happened on the 4th night of what was supposed to be a relaxing 7-day cruise out of Miami. And it's the reason I will never step foot on a ship again. I worked as a deckhand, not glamorous work, mostly maintenance, mopping walkways, hauling supplies between decks. The pay was decent, the room was smaller than a closet, and I shared it with a guy named Mike, who'd been working ships for almost 6 years. Mike was the kind of guy who'd seen everything. Medical emergencies, engine fires, nothing rattled him. That's what made what happened so hard to process. Because by the end of that night, Mike wasn't the same person anymore. It started with a smell. Around 11 at night on Deck 2, near the crew stairwell that led down toward the engine section, there was this smell like burning rubber mixed with something sweeter, almost chemical. I radioed it in because that's protocol. Anything that smells like it could be electrical, you report immediately. A senior engineer named Frank told me to go check the ventilation shaft access point near engine room 3, just to rule out a fire risk before he came down himself. I grabbed Mike because you're never supposed to go into restricted sections alone. Ship rules. We took the service elevator down, past the passenger decks, past the laundry facility, down into the belly of the ship where the air changes completely. It gets hotter, louder. The hum of the engines isn't just something you hear anymore, it's something you feel in your chest. The corridor down there is narrow, maybe wide enough for two people walking shoulder to shoulder, lined with pipes and cable trays bolted into the walls. Emergency lighting only, orange and dim, spaced out every 20 feet or so. Mike had his flashlight, I had mine. We found the ventilation access point exactly where Frank said it would be, a metal grate about waist high, bolted into the wall. The smell was stronger there, sharp enough that my eyes started watering a little. Mike crouched down and started unscrewing the grate panel with the multi-tool from his belt, and I stood behind him, sweeping my flashlight down the corridor because standing still in a place like that makes you restless. You want to know what's around you. That's when I noticed the access panel further down the hall, maybe 30 feet away, was already open. Not damaged, not forced, just sitting there unlatched like someone had gone in and hadn't bothered closing it. I told Mike. He didn't look up right away, just kept working on the screws, said panels get left open sometimes when maintenance runs behind schedule, nothing to panic about. I believed him. I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was standing in a 200-foot metal corridor below the waterline of a moving ship, thinking too hard about why that panel might have been left open. Then we heard it, a sound like metal scraping against metal, slow and deliberate, coming from inside the open vent shaft down the hall, like something heavy being dragged across a surface, stopping, then starting again. Mike froze with the screwdriver still in his hand. I remember watching the muscles in his jaw tighten. Ships make noise, that's normal, pipes expand, metal contracts with heat, but this wasn't that kind of sound. This had rhythm to it. Drag, stop, like it was being done on purpose. I asked Mike what it was. He said he didn't know, and for the first time since I'd met him, his voice actually shook a little when he said it. We should have called it in right there. Looking back, that's the mistake, the one decision that changed everything. But Mike said we needed to at least look, because if it was a structural issue with the ductwork, something that could compromise the ventilation system for the whole engine deck, ignoring it could put the entire ship at risk. He was thinking like a professional. I was just scared enough to go along with it. We walked toward the open panel together, flashlights up. The dragging sound stopped completely the moment we got within about 10 feet, like whatever was making it had timed it perfectly. The silence afterward was somehow worse than the noise had been. Mike reached the open panel first. He crouched down, shined his light inside the shaft, and went completely still. Not scared still, something else, like his whole body had locked up. I asked him what he was looking at. He didn't answer. I moved closer, and that's when I smelled it properly, the same burning sweet smell from before, except now it was overwhelming. I looked into the shaft myself. Inside, the ductwork bent sharply downward into a narrower channel that fed into the ship's secondary cooling system, an area that connected directly to one of the auxiliary generator rooms. And down at the bottom of that channel, coiled and half-melted into the metal casing, was a length of exposed wiring that had clearly been cut and rewired badly by hand. Not a manufacturing fault, not corrosion. Someone had gone into that shaft and tampered with the wiring on purpose, splicing it into a section that fed directly into a fuel line valve sensor 2 decks below. Mike finally spoke, and what he said still sits with me. He said in 11 years on ships, he'd seen sabotage investigations before, disgruntled crew members, insurance fraud attempts, but never something wired this deep into a live system, this close to a fuel line, on a ship carrying 4,000 passengers. We called it in immediately. Within 20 minutes, the entire engine section was locked down. Security was combing every crew cabin, and by morning 2 crew members had been quietly removed from the ship at the next port and handed over to federal investigators. I never learned the full story, only that it involved a financial dispute with the cruise line and someone willing to put thousands of lives at risk to make a point. What stays with me isn't the wiring or the investigation or even the smell. It's the sound. That slow, deliberate dragging, stopping right when we got close enough to hear it clearly. Because to this day, nobody has ever explained what that sound actually was. The wiring itself was silent when they finally pulled it apart. It couldn't have made that noise on its own. Mike finished out that contract and never went back to sea again. Neither did I, and if you ever find yourself on a cruise ship, enjoying the buffet, the pool deck, the illusion that everything below your feet is simple machinery quietly doing its job, just remember, there are miles of corridors down there that passengers never see. And sometimes, the things that go wrong on a ship aren't accidents at all. They're built, piece by piece, by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. If these stories kept you up a little tonight, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. If this video gave you chills, smash the like button. Drop a comment below and tell us which story hit the hardest. We read every single one. Stay safe out there. We'll see you in the next one.